Okay. So, all right. All right. Let me start off with some announcements. Announcement number one. I'm going to show you a little bit of part of a little part of my life. This is me as a student at Seneca College, taking computer programming analysis diploma. I'm going to show you a screenshot of my transcript here. Here, see this F right there? So I failed object-oriented programming with C++. Now, what I didn't know, and what I don't want you to do the same mistake as this, I didn't know there was a drop due date for like dropping courses at the college, where if I had dropped this course before that due date, this mark would never have been on my transcript. And it pains me because every time I apply somewhere, like a college or university, they always want to see my previous transcripts, which I wish I knew, because then if I knew that, if I had dropped that before the due date, then this would not say F, it would say withdrawn or WD. So if you're in that boat for this class, consider the drop due date for Georgian is this Friday. So how do you know if that's you? Well, consider this. We've already done 50% of the coursework. So if you're at half of that, like 25% or lower, you may want to consider that, because essentially you have to get perfect from here on in to get passed. So that's how I would think of it. And I do believe they offer this course in the summer. So consider that. You'll have to take it again, yeah. I think they offer it again in the summer. What was that? Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. So it's up to you, but I'm just throwing it out there so that you don't make the same mistake I did. But it's up to you, okay? Next announcement. Oh yeah. So remember how I said there's all kinds of tutoring available at the library? There's actually more than I thought for you because of the COPA. Because COPA students now have JavaScript under their belt. So under tutoring, if I say just give me the computer people, computer tutors, and give me the whole week. So every week, so you already promoted this IMDW tutor. I don't know if I promoted this. There's a COPA tutor at Thursday between 11 and 2. There's also a COPA tutor. I thought there was another one elsewhere. Next week, let's go to next week here. Oh yeah, look at that. COPA tutor 3 to 6 p.m. on Monday. COPA tutor 1 to 5 on Wednesday. Again, yeah, so you have, between the IMDW and the 3 COPAs, you have, go in there. If you're the ones, like based on your quiz, if you got like, say 0.6 or lower, I would recommend you go to one of these tutors and just tell them, I need help accessing arrays with for loops, and they will help you. Are they? All of these? Oh, okay. Well, I tried. Next thing. I'm going to get back into objects. I'm going to touch upon last class about objects for a second. Some things I missed, but just want you to know. So I'm going to define an object. Const equals, yeah. So here's the object I had last week. Did you know that you can also add new key values or new properties? So what you can do is you can say like person dot, I don't know, grade equals like F, right? And then you press enter. And as soon as you press enter, if I were to console log person again, look at that. Now you see the new added property and value. Not only that, but did you know you can also modify it? So you can say person.grade, let's modify it to B. Enter. So now if I console log that person, it is now B. And finally, did you know you can also delete things? So if I said delete person.grade, notice it gave the return value of true, and I console log the person, and notice that key value of grade is gone. So those are 3 very important things that you need to know in the future. What else did I want to mention? Oh, question.
I was wondering, like, can you put them in a specific spot? Like, say you want a really long object, so like, you want to put something like maybe name and last name.
Oh, you're talking about the sequence or the order of the.
Like, this way you have a really
Oh, that's a really good point. Okay, here's the cool thing, Ivan. For objects, it doesn't matter what the order is.
I was thinking when you're looking at yourself, to keep it straight, right? So not like Al, 30 Georgian, like, you know, let them know your last name and like your address and like.
Oh, okay. I think you're talking about just from a visual standpoint. Okay, check this out. Great point. And I was going to mention this too last week. Check this out. So not only can I just console log person, which visually speaking isn't very nice. What you can also do is console.table person. This only works with objects, but it gives you that kind of thing. Let me maybe, as a even better example, I'm just going to grab an array of some random things. So here's an array of random objects that I got. Let me say let b equals that array. Done. So if I console log b, I have an array of 3 objects. If I console.table b, I get that nice visual layout. Is that the kind of thing you're asking about?
I was going to think like for our larger fun the run thing.
Okay.
Say you had it organized wrong and you realized you wanted to add an extra thing, so you were organizing like.
Oh, I see.
And you want 4 entrees, you have 4 entrees, 3 sides, 3 salads. Just for your own visual, you know, like so it's not all jumbled.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think for objects, it's like whatever order it's in. But the important thing is the order of the keys doesn't matter, unlike arrays. But in terms of visual, I don't know if there's a. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah. What else did I want to mention? Okay, so I just want to mention where I got this fake data from, because in your future, if you ever need some fake JSON data, which is the topic of today, JSON, you can go to this website called Makaroo, which is kind of neat. I would recommend bookmarking this. And what you can do is, put in your fields that you want, and not only that, it has a great type field where you can actually choose different things like car model year or catchphrases. So if I say catchphrase there, and let me just delete all the other ones that I don't want, and then I say give me like 3 JSON formatted catchphrases, and it just gives you that. So it notices in JSON, or basically an object that you can now copy and paste into your code. If you need something fast, I would recommend that. Okay. I wanted to also mention the keyword this. So here, my function, if I said, oh no, I didn't go over this. So I'm going to go over this in another class. Forget what I was about to introduce. Never mind. Any questions so far? What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to quickly go over one of the quizzes. Or actually, you know what? I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to go more basic than that. For those of you who got like 0.6 or lower, this is for you. I really need you to know how to use arrays and for loops. Okay, so today's quiz is basically the same as last week, except you have to use an object instead of a thing. So I'm just going to grab, actually, no, I'm going to do this in Quokka. Okay, so how do you define a function? And let me pick on, I don't know. I don't want to single anyone out here. Emily, how do I define a function? Yeah, good. So I have to say the word function, and I want to label it a name like, I'll give it, shuffled. So shuffled, yeah, and then what? Brackets, and then curly brackets. Perfect. That's how you define a function. Some of you don't know how to define a function. That's how you define a function. Okay. I want now, Emily, I want in here, I want a loop. I want to create a for loop that begins with 0 and ends with 5. How do I do that? I don't want to use for each. I just want to use a for loop, which looks like that. So what's in the first thing? Okay, so the first thing, so here's the lesson. The first thing, there's 3 parts, okay? There's the left-hand side, the middle part, and the last part. What goes in here is your initial condition. So you can say let I equals 0, okay? Because the purpose of this I is going to be a counter. It's going to count through your array, for example. So if I had an array called const my array, and I have 1, 2, 3, or maybe just even simpler ABC, because I don't want to get confused with I, okay? And if I want to console log each of these values, I can't just say in my loop, my R of 0. That won't work because it'll always print A every single time. So I need some variable in here that changes. That's why it's called a variable, because it varies. So the I represents the value 0 for the first time of the loop, and then it'll increment each time, thereby incrementing the value. So what goes here, Emily, is the test condition. This is basically telling the for loop, if this test condition is true, then go ahead and run this code. If not, then don't, kind of thing. So what do you think goes here? We already know this is going to be I++, which increments the I at the end. But what goes here in the middle? What do you think? I is greater than 0. So think about that. It's going to start off with 0, and then it's going to look at, is 0 greater than 0? No, it's false. Therefore, it won't even run this code. Right? If you're saying I is equal to 0, that means it's basically substituting I with 0. Is 0 greater than 0? True or false? False. Therefore, it won't run this. So you need. What was that? So this is this. Imagine this I++ is equivalent to I equals I plus 1. That's what's happening with I++. This runs at the very bottom of the loop. Okay. So it's the I is 0 for the first time. So basically, it looks here. I is 0, and what's this my array of 0? My array of 0 is A. So it'll console log A, for example. Okay, and then here it adds 1. So now I is no longer 0, it's 1. So then it is 1 greater than 0? So but this test condition here should be something like this. My array.length, and there could be a -1 depending on what you do. There could be an equal there depending on what you want to do. But this should be something like this, where it'll access each element in the array. So this is the most basic fundamental things I need everybody here to know. Okay, and so what I've done is for each quiz from here on in until the end of the semester, it's going to pound you with all these quizzes, which basically forces you how to do for loops with arrays, because I need you to know that if you want to go to the move on kind of thing. Okay. All right, that's just that. Next thing I want to do, let's get into today's topics of JSON. Any questions before I move on to JSON? What's JSON? Here, I'll show you JSON. You've already seen it before. Even this Makaru creates JSON, right? And you just saw it when I said preview. It gave this, and that is JSON. What does that look like in JavaScript notation to you? It looks like an object, like it's an array of objects, right? Here's the square bracket indicating it's an array. Here's each of the objects, and that's basically JSON. However, I'm going to go into this more into detail. So I want everyone to open up a new tab, and we've done this before. Go to api.github.com/users/avcoder. It's not avcoder. Just put in your GitHub username instead of mine. Press enter, and you should see your data from GitHub here. Right? I think I've done this before. Good. Okay, so the question is this. What data structure does this look like? JSON. When you look at it, it looks like an object because it has the curly bracket, right? It has the key value pairs separated by colons in the middle, separated with the commas as well at the ends of each entry. So it looks like an object. Okay. Question. If you look on the right-hand side of each of the entries, so the right-hand side after the colon of each of the entries, shout out to me some of the data types that you see. Fundamental data types. Strings, obviously, yes. What else? Numbers. Boolean, yeah, there's a Boolean. Good, good. Yeah, so this one doesn't have the other objects, but yes, you can have other nested objects. Yes, you can have arrays. So JSON looks very similar to regular JavaScript objects. Question, if you copy the whole thing, so copy from highlight the first squiggly bracket and scroll down, and scroll down to the last squiggly bracket and copy it, so, Control C or right click, copy it. And then let's go into the console. So inspect your code or Control Shift J to get into your console here. By the way, if you want to ever clear your console, it's Control L. I don't know if I mentioned that. And then just say, const my obj equals, and then paste in what you just copied and press enter. Does it work? Is there an error? Okay. Well, yeah. Sorry. The undefined doesn't represent an error. It's not returning anything, but it's valid. It's valid. Otherwise, it would complain. So it's not complaining. So the point is, oh, cool. I can grab JSON data, assign it to my variable, and I can work with it. I can now do stuff like, let's see, Emily, I already said const my obj equals all of that, okay? So if I want to console log this value of AV coder, how would I do it? So it's my obj. So what do you think? I want to output this value here of AV coder. Everything, all of this data is assigned to this label called my obj. So now this comes back to the fundamental question, how do I access object data? And the answer is through dot notation. So I'm going to give you the answer. The answer is my obj dot, and Emily, what's the label beside the thing I want? What's the label beside it? So if I say my obj dot login, there, I get the value that I want. Does that make sense? No? I'm just saying this is how to access values. Okay, so similarly, Emily, if I want this number, if I want to access this value, how do I access that? Okay. You understand? Similarly, I could delete that, right? I could delete my obj.id. Let's see it now. And it should be gone. It's gone, right? Log into node ID, and we're missing ID. So we could modify it, whatever. Okay, next question. I did that manually, yes. So when I say manually, I just physically used my mouse, highlighted the thing, copied it, put it in my console, put it in my code, so to speak, so I could use it. But we want to do that programmatically. And you can do that using something called fetch. Before I show you that, one other thing that I want you to notice is notice how the keys here in JSON are wrapped in double quotes. Okay? Whereas when we created objects earlier, like when I created some object earlier, like, I don't know what it was, const person. Yeah. Notice I didn't have quotes around that. What would happen if I were to put quotes around this? Will it accept it? What do you think? What do you think? Yeah. Same thing. Okay, so that's an option for objects is you can have double quotes or single quotes in the case of us here, or you can have no quotes at all here. However, there is a difference between JSON and JavaScript objects. I'm going to get into that in a second. Question, does anyone know what the previous format was for exchanging data like this between systems? And it wasn't JSON, it was something else. XML, who said that? Yes, XML. Let's take a look at what XML looks like. In case you weren't familiar, XML. So let's look at, I don't know, look at that. What does this look like to you? HTML. That's because XML is a subset of HTML. But before JSON, data was being passed around like this. Question, why do you think JSON is now the standard instead of XML in terms of popularity? Think performance. Think parsing. Yeah, I'm not even sure if XML can be nested. I'm sure it can. I'm thinking of more like, no, I'm thinking more like, okay, remember how I asked you earlier to come here, simply copy this, paste it into your code, and now you can use it? Can I do the same thing with this? Can I copy this? Let's suppose I can copy this. Can I then like paste it in my JavaScript code and use it? No. So what do I have to do first? I have to import it. I have to use the colons. I have to parse it. I have to like transform this into an actual JavaScript object before I can use it, right? Whereas this one, it's ready to go. So I'm hoping you can see why JSON is now the more popular, because in terms of performance, I don't have to do additional work with JSON, whereas with XML, I had to actually do something. That, you know, some program, some software has to read each character, determine if it's valid, and transfer it to JSON. Like, who wants that? Performance. Okay. So basically, the answer I was looking for is faster parsing with JSON, smaller file size, right? Because you're not littering your data with all these markup. I mean, this is right there, kind of thing. Question: can other languages besides JavaScript make use of JSON? Yes, the answer is yes. Okay, even in your PHP class, did you learn how to transform your, like, let's say you did a MySQL query to your database, you fetched the data, you stored it in your variable, your associated array, whatever. Did anyone teach you how to then echo that out as JSON in PHP? No? The magical, I'll show you the magical code for that. It's right here. So here is some PHP code. So here I'm selecting some data from my database. I execute that, and then I fetch stuff. I put it into votes. So this votes is actually an array, an associated array. It's you can sort of think of an associated array as just a JavaScript object where it has on the left-hand side the label, the right-hand side the value, and it's an array of that. But here is the magical code. You wrap that variable into JSON, into a function. You basically call JSON encode on that variable, and now you can echo that out. So think about it. you can now, in your PHP, you can select some data, and instead of displaying it as a web page, you could just spit it out as JSON. Okay? And in my previous class that I taught last year, if you ever look at those lectures, you'll see an example where I actually tell the class, hey, class, come to my PHP web page where you can vote A, B, C, or D, and then it actually goes into my database. And then when I go to this particular URL, api.php, it'll tell me in JSON format what the votes are. But that's the kind of thing that you can do. Again, this emphasizes my point earlier where I said a lot of JavaScript work now is taking JSON data, making the browser do all the hard work of transforming that JSON data into HTML, and then just display it on the web page. And so now you can do that with PHP. Okay. Let's see here. Now here's where I mentioned there is a difference between objects, JavaScript objects, and JSON. And here's where I'm getting at. So open up your console, and let's create an object again. So just say this in your console, say const person equals, and just shift enter there to, actually, do I have to say shift enter anymore, or no? Can I just say enter in Chrome? No, I can't say enter, otherwise it tries to run it kind of thing. Actually, no, hold on. Const. If I just leave it hanging and say enter without shift enter. Yeah, good. Okay, so they changed that. So add some properties, you know, name is whatever, Bob, comma, age, whatever. Now here's where I'm getting at. I want you to put a function in here. So let's say like greet function, and then, you know, console log. Let's close that up, and then enter. So the question is this. I already demonstrated to you that you can simply copy the JSON data and paste it into your code, and you could use it right away. The question is this. Can I go the other way around? Can I then copy this and make that into JSON data? And here's one way to do it. So copy this object. So highlight the first bracket to the last bracket. Copy that. Open up a new tab and go to the following website, jsonlint.com. jsonlint.com will verify whether or not it's valid JSON. So paste in your object. Paste it in my object. And there should be a button here called Validate JSON. So if you click it, what does it say? Yeah, it's where's the error message here? Here's the error message down below. It says parse error. Expecting a string wrapped in quotes got undefined instead. So here's one difference between JSON and JavaScript objects. JSON data has to have everything wrapped in double quotes or in quotes. Well, actually, just double quotes. See, if I say, so if you begin wrapping the name with double quotes and then click on Validate JSON, see if it changes. It does change. Now it's complaining about Bob, I believe. So then, if I change Bob to double quotes, and now press Validate JSON, does it move on to another one? Yeah, it does. It says age. Actually, the error message isn't very good, is it? Anyways, it's complaining about age. So let's now wrap everything. Let's wrap age, oops, and the number 30 in double quotes and see what happens now. So click on Validate JSON. And now it's complaining about the greet function. Now, Let's try this. Can we drop everything in double quotes here? Will it accept it? That's the question. Validate JSON? No. And in fact, there is no way to put functions into JSON. And that's the point. So the fundamental difference between JavaScript object and JSON is JSON. First of all, you need double quotes for everything. But it doesn't accept functions. So you cannot pass functions like that. So this right here, that would be valid JSON, I believe. Oh, no, there's one more rule. JSON doesn't want a trailing comma. So take away that trailing comma, validate JSON, and now look at that, valid JSON. So it's very picky, as you can see. But that is the difference between JSON and objects. Okay. I said before, when I was asking the question, what fundamental data types, and you told me strings and numbers. So let's see what happens if I take away this 30 string and I just put the number 30. It should, I believe it should work. Validate, yep, it works. Right? Cool. All right. So the point is JSON doesn't take functions or methods. Okay, here's one other thing I wanted to mention. So back here in this tab, I have an actual object. If I ever wanted to, actually, let me take, knowing what we know now, let me take away the greet. I'm just going to delete the greet. If I wanted to now take this object and create JSON, so it's transmitted through the wire, so to speak. To do that, I'd have to basically transform this into a string. To do that, you use this command, JSON.stringify, and then so that's a function, so you need the parentheses. Then in those parentheses, you put person. Enter. So notice what it did. It took my object and turned it into one huge string. This huge string is basically what is transmitted by things like this. So when you saw this initially, okay, all of this is basically one big string, essentially, that GitHub spits out at you. Okay, now, I kind of misled you when I copied and pasted because it seems like, oh, it's just an easy thing. Now, the reality is, whenever we fetch this, which I'm going to show you in a second, when we programmatically use the fetch command to grab this JSON data, it's one big string. We can't do anything with a big string, right? I can't say, let me see here. Like, if this is my string, I can't just say, person.name, because that doesn't work with a string. I still have to parse it. So in a sense, there's still some parsing involved, but it's simply JSON.parse, and then in that you would put the variable that contains the big string. And then by doing that, it would go backwards and then transform the big string back into the object that you can use, the workable object. Okay. We are now going to experiment with that right now. So I'm now going to teach you the command to fetch JSON. Oh, question, Kian. Oh, hey, great question. Great question. The question is, what would happen if you tried to stringify it, yet there's a function inside it? Okay, so let's put back, there he goes. Okay, so here's my thing. So let's say JSON stringify person. Show of hands, who thinks the greet will be there? Show of hands, who thinks the greet will not be there? Okay, let's see if you're right. Ha. So it doesn't like, again, JSON does not like, will not accept functions. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to teach you programmatically how to fetch JSON data. Okay, so we're going to use the same GitHub data that you were just using. And And we're just going to do it in the console for now, just to keep it simple. Or should I do it in? Oh yeah. Yeah. Great question. So why do we need JSON in JavaScript? Let me think of something you've already done. Yes. Take your assignment number 2. Assignment number 2, you had basically images given to you, and I believe most of you put it in an array. Anyways, what if the images weren't given to you for assignment 2? What if the assignment were to ask you, okay, do the same assignment 2 with the images, however, you're going to get those images somewhere else on the web through a URL, okay? And that URL will spit out JSON data. In that JSON data will be the URLs to each of those images. That's why you need JSON data. So the answer to why do you need JSON is you need to exchange data from server to client. And the analogy that I used to give is this. So all of you have taken PHP, yeah? So where did your data come from? It came from a SQL database. And what did you do with that data? You then used PHP to turn that data into a web page, right? Same thing here. Where is our database coming from? We don't have one. It's coming now from the JSON data. So you can think of the JSON data as like your SQL if you want. It's the new SQL way. Okay? All right. So here is what I'm going to introduce. Before I teach you the way I want you to learn, I'm going to now demonstrate for you the historical ways of doing this. So I'm about to demonstrate how to fetch JSON data in a million different ways. I'm going to teach you the oldest way, to the second oldest way, to the ES6 promises way, to the ES8 async await way, which is the one I want you to learn, to FYI, here's another library that can do the same thing. Okay? So you don't have to necessarily do this. Just watch until we get to the one I want. Then I want you to do this. Okay? Any questions so far? Let me find my notes first. There it is. Okay. Maybe I'll do this in Visual Studio Code first. Let me. I'll just call this get JSON. There, and in here, I'll just put a script tag. Okay, so here's the old way. Old way, don't use this anymore, but you may come across it. So I'm teaching it. Here's the old tried and true way. So it's something called XML HTTP request. So right now I'm going to put in my API URL. I'll just say request URL equals my GitHub, which is api.github.com, whatever. So I'm just storing the URL into a variable right now. Okay. Now here's something to start it off. You say const request equals new XML HTTP request. By the way, let me show you something that may not seem significant to you, but it was for me. So as I grew up, when the internet was born, essentially, all my experience of the internet was like this. You see a link, you click a link, it reloads the page, it displays the page. But there's always like a microsecond delay of click, page, click, page. The first time I saw this, it absolutely blew my mind. How can I click the page without refreshing? Like it's dynamic, it's loading data. The answer is through this XML HTTP request. This was the beginning when Google Maps, around that era, that was when they started using what's called AJAX ways. So when you hear the term AJAX, let's ask Google what AJAX stands for, because there's a debate about that, but whatever. Here it says asynchronous JavaScript and XML. We don't use XML anymore, we use JSON, but basically the technique is still the same. Where under the hood, we are fetching data as if, you know, a user went, it's as if a user typed in this into the web URL bar, pressed enter, and by pressing enter, it submitted, the browser submitted a GET request to the server, and the server spit back JSON data. That's what AJAX is. That's what this whole XML HTTP request is. It's just like someone behind the scenes doing the GET request for you. So here's the way to do it. You'd say request.open get request URL. So just by looking at this statement, we are saying we're going to use a GET request on this URL, which happens to be the GitHub one. Okay. Now, this line, by the way, does not actually begin the process of talking to the server yet. We're just setting some variables in place. So right now, we're just calling a function, and we're just setting some arguments in that object that it's creating. So and notice we're using the dot notation. So we are, in essence, we're creating we're modifying values in the object. So here's the object called request, and we're now going to say we're going to access a property called response type, and we're going to say JSON. And then here's the magical line to execute that. It's called request.send. So this line will actually submit a GET request to the computer, and that computer will come back with some kind of response. However, we need to code something that will take care of that response. So here's where the next little bit comes in: request.add event listener. We're going to listen for the load event, and then we're going to run a function where let's put in some data. Data equals request.response. So what's happening here is at this point, we're setting up a listener so that when the other computer around the world gives us that data, we will hear something called load, and then now it'll run this code here. So it'll take the response from that other computer around the world, assign that response into our data, which we can now work with it. So I'll just console log the data. Let's see if this works. I'm going to run this. Let's see, go live. Console. Let's see if we get our data. So right now I see an object. Does it have my GitHub data? Let's see. It does. So I did it programmatically speaking. I did it. Okay. Cool. That is the old way. I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to show you the second oldest way. This way was demonstrated to me when I was a student here for comp1073, and he did this way. The professor did this. So we'll start off with, I'll keep this request URL uncommented because I will use that again. And he did this. Request equals new. Same thing as above. Then he said request.open, and basically essentially did the same thing as above, except he just directly put in the data, hard-coded the data. But so far, so good. So far, the same thing as before. Okay, no difference really. But then here's where it gets different. He goes like this: request.add event listener. We're listening for something called ready state change. Function. And then he has this weird if statement. Const data log data. Okay, let's see what happens now. Let's run, actually, before I run it, let me explain what's going on here with the if statement. So what's happening is as soon as this line executes and it talks to the computer around the world, there's going to be different events happening within this computer, local computer, and all of these events are starting to fire one after another, called ready state change. And ready state change will fire lots of times. At first, it'll start with ready state to be 0. So then, it's doing its networking thing, and eventually the ready state gets to 1, gets to 2, gets to 3. When it finally gets to 4, then, and if the what is it, 20? Sorry, it's 200. And if the status that we got was 200, meaning if the other computer sent back to us data, it gives us a 200, which, by the way, what does 200 mean in networking land? No? Here, check it out. So let's go to some website, .ca. Let's go to the network tab. Let's click on refresh on that website. And I believe here, where to go? There it is. How come I didn't want that. I wanted, there it is. Look at that. So I'm going to google.ca, I click refresh. This network tab actually monitors what is being downloaded to your computer right now from the other computer around the world. And it's saying, okay, this we requested something called inject.js. Did we get it? Yes, we got a 200 from the other computer. Therefore, it means okay. So 200 means okay, right? It says right there, 200 okay. And if it's missing, you get a 404 error. I wonder if there's any 404 errors here. Probably not. But 404, you're all familiar with 404. That's on the network end. So let's run this here and see if we get the same thing. And I believe we should get the same thing, but yet something different, I think. Oh, it did. I'm not getting anything at all. I'm not sure why. Here, so type everything right. Looking at my notes. Oh, I need a JSON parse here. Still, I should have still seen something in my console. So I'm not sure if that's the answer. Is this right? No, I'm not getting it. I think I mistyped something, and I'm just checking my notes. But essentially, this is the second old way. And the big idea is this if statement that has this weird check for equals 4 and equals 200. Okay. Oh, I forgot. Remember how I said, I know why it's not working. Remember how I said up to this point here, and I said we're just setting some variables. We're not actually talking. We're not actually executing. We need the request.send too. I think that's what it is. Try that. Oh, there it is. I got it. Got the data. Cool. But notice I had to use JSON parse here, whereas before I didn't say JSON parse. I just say console log data. So that means if I take off the JSON parse, I bet you it's just a string. Let's see if that's true. Yeah, see? It's just a string. So if I can't say, data.login here. I can't. Refresh undefined. I have to first, JSON.parse the data to make the string into a workable thing, and then I could use the login there to get AV coder. So those are the two old ways, just for FYI information that you may come across. But here are the two newer ways that I want you to do. Now, this is where I want you to start typing it in. So just using the console in your browser, I'm going to show you the ES6 way first. I'm going to then show you the ES8 way, which is the real way I want you to memorize. So this first ES6 way will look a little bit different. You're not used to this syntax. So type in the command fetch. In quotes, put in your GitHub API URL. And here's the difference here. You say .then. So what's going to happen here? It's going to fetch some data from some computer across the world. When that data comes back, it'll come as a response. we still have to translate that response thing that the other computer gave us into actual workable JSON data. So when we get the response, we're going to create a function here that transforms that response into workable JSON data. And then once that function has run and done its thing, then we can use it. So we're going to create another function. We'll just say console log data. Try this out. Try this line out. Press enter. See what you get. Actually, I have a feeling that you won't get anything. Let's see what happens if I press enter. Oh no, you got something. Okay, good. Chrome has updated their stuff. Good. Okay. So what is happening here? Essentially, the simple answer is this is the new standard way, the newish standard way of getting your JSON data. Okay, you no longer have to rely on the XML HTTP request. You can just use the fetch command. So this fetch command should be available across all browsers. Let's just check this website. Is everyone familiar with this website called Can I Use? Show of hands, yes? No? Just one or two? So Can I Use is a standard. You should definitely bookmark this. You can ask, hey, can I use the fetch command in all browsers? And it'll give you a little thing here. Say, yeah, you can use it. Basically, wherever it's green, you can use the fetch command in those browsers. So okay, I can use fetch command in Edge version 80, Chrome version 42 onward, essentially. So it's well supported in most browsers. Okay. This is how you would use it. However, now I'm going to show you the real modern way of using it. And this is what I teach in my advanced JavaScript course. So if I can get you to do this now, then you'll be better off for it. And here's how it goes. You know what, either way, either the ES6 way or this thing I'm about to show you now, either way it's good, okay? So let's do this. Create a function. Oh, I can't press enter for some reason. I have to say shift enter. Shift enter. We're going to do the same fetch command in here. Shift enter, close off your function, but don't press enter yet. We're going to add a couple of different things. Before the word function, you're going to add this word called async. And then before the fetch command, you're going to add this, const response equals await. The advantage of using this async await, what I call async await method, is it gets you away from the .thens. And essentially, when you saw me typing the .thens, what's happening is it's using something called a promise, which is new in JavaScript. And the promise was invented to try to get away from callback hell. And for those of you who don't know callback hell, it looks like this. Callback hell. Kind of looks like this. Okay, so the disadvantage of JavaScript in terms of readability is that you could possibly have function within a function within a function within a function, and it makes this sort of like Christmas tree, sideways Christmas tree thing, and that's so hard to debug. That's callback hell. So promises were invented to get away from that. So essentially, the whatever is inside the then, whatever is inside that, that's essentially one of these functions. So instead of seeing it like this, you're seeing it just the .then vertically. Fetch .then. So it's just one vertical line instead of like that kind of thing. But then the disadvantage of the promises way in terms of readability is there's still such thing as a promise hell. And so they invented a couple of years later async await. And this is the one I want you to use. because visually speaking, this looks like it's synchronous code, just like PHP is synchronous code, but under the hood, it's still doing asynchronous stuff. So there's a lot of advanced stuff going here with async await, which I will not get into, but it's essentially using promises under the hood, as well as something called generators, which we'll probably get into next course. So here, we're going to say const data equals await this. So notice that we're doing the same kind of thing. We're transforming the response into JSON, and we're storing it into data. But after that's done, we can now console log that data. So we're doing the same exact thing, except visually speaking, it looks totally understandable to me, because it's saying, oh, I get it. We're fetching the data. We're storing the data into this variable called res. We're then transforming the res into JSON. We're storing that into a variable called data, so now we can console log data. I get that. Whereas with the thing I showed you before with the .thens, it was a little bit confusing. There was still a little bit of callback confusion, perhaps. So press enter. Oh wait, we need to label this something. So async function get JSON. Right. So we need the name. So press enter. There. We defined the function. How do we run a function? We need to call it. So this is called get JSON. So let's enter this. Let's see what happens. Press enter. What do you get? Same thing. Same thing. Okay, so this is the new style of getting data that I want you to try to memorize going forward. I will test you this, not for this course, but for the next course. But as long as you get used to this, then we're happy. I'm going to give a side shout out to this library called Axios. You may see some other developers use, no, not that Axios, this Axios. You may see some other developers use this library called Axios, which basically uses XML HTTP requests. And how you use it is very similar to the .thens that I showed you. Right, so here's their library, axios.get some URL, and then they have the .thens. Except they only have one .then. They don't have two .thens like I had. So under the hood, it's doing something even fancier than the one I showed you. Okay, but some other developers may choose Axios instead. Let's get to use to this one. This is the ES8, I believe, or ES9 way of fetching data. Okay, so any questions on that? That's basically, oh, right. So this is what I want you to do. So from now, so here's the exercise. And I think I put the exercise up on CodePen. Let me see if I can find it. Where are my notes? Where are my notes? Oh, that's terrible. Could I Okay, I'm now going to copy that URL, put it into Blackboard, weekly learning, week 9. And let's see, where I'm going to put under lesson files. I'll say, go here. Go here. Paste, submit. Okay, so you should get the link that in Blackboard that I just pasted should take you here. You'll notice a sample card there that I displayed there using, I don't even know what CSS framework this is, but it doesn't matter. What I want you to do, your challenge for the next little bit, is use what I taught you to fetch the JSON data from your GitHub, which will contain data on your name, your username, your number of followers, number of repos or repositories. Maybe there's a field there for like your bio. And basically, you're going to display that, oh, and your image, your avatar image. And you're going to replace all of this through JavaScript. Okay? So step 1 is to fetch the data, the JSON data. Step 2 is, now that you have the data, go ahead and use your query selectors to target what you need to target and change what you need to change with your stuff. So at the end of the day, it's going to have your GitHub picture on here, your username on here, your bio here, your number of repositories here. You can change the word photos to repositories. You can change the word friends to followers. and changing the numbers to what you have. That's the challenge for the next little bit until, let's say, 12:30. Then we'll take a break. Okay, so let me show you a reminder on code on how to do that. There it is. So have fun for the next 20 minutes. This is not being, huh? Oh, question? Yeah. With the console? Okay, I'll do this. Maria. What? Promise? So the question is, what is promise? Yeah, okay, great question. I was hoping to save that for next year's course or next course, but I'll say this. I'm trying to give an example, an easy. Okay, here's. I'm gonna give you the problem, and then I'm gonna give you the solution of promise and why it was invented, and maybe that'll. So here's the problem. Let's say we're fetching some URL, okay, but we're doing this. Let's do this the traditional way, using these functions, okay. Here's the problem. If I have some kind of command that actually fetches the URL, okay, in here, the problem is, from an asynchronous point of view. Oh, okay. I thought I forget. Okay, here it is. Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons. Let's pretend you're in the restaurant for Tim Hortons, and I think I gave this Tim Hortons analogy before. Let's say you order panini, a sandwich that takes time to make in the kitchen, right? So let's say you're at the cashier desk and you order the panini. What's supposed to happen? Question to you: do you get the panini right away? Okay. Well, same thing for the fetch command. The fetch command, in terms of computing cycles, is trying to talk to a computer around the world. That takes time, like a lot of time in terms of computing cycles. So it's the same kind of thing. It takes forever. But the problem is, you can't have JavaScript waiting. Like it has to be. It's single-threaded. It waits for no one. It's asynchronous, so it's going to go to the next command. But the problem is, as soon as it goes to the next command, let's say the next command is, let's do something with that data, let's do something with that panini, it's going to error out because the panini is not made yet. The data hasn't been fetched yet. So the solution to that, the old way, was to use a function callback. So you had some kind of function, and inside here you had another function, right? An anonymous function that does something. So basically, you've seen this before already. The purpose of this is, it's called a callback function for a reason. It's because this will be called back at a later point in time and will be executed at a later point in time so that it can eat the panini, for example. Get it? So the problem of this style of coding is inherent in JavaScript, and for readability, it may be confusing at first, so that's why they invented promises. Promises was a way to get away from this style of coding, so it's easier on the eyes, but under the hood, it's still doing this. So what's happening in the Tim Hortons is you buy a panini. What do they give you back? A receipt. That receipt is exactly like a promise. It's a IOU. So a promise is an IOU. But the beauty of the IOU in JavaScript is you can now work with it. So let's say the next line of code is, let's eat the panini. JavaScript won't break anymore because it has something to hold on to, the receipt. That's what a promise is. That was good. I like that. That was good. OK. So here's your challenge until 12:30-ish or so. So get your data. OK. So basically, you're essentially copying this data and pasting it in here. but changing to your URL instead of mine. And once you get the data, instead of consoling out the data, actually use the data. So data.login will give avcoder in this case. So actually put that value of avcoder into Olivia Dunham, that kind of thing. Actually get experience using the data that you fetched. So that is the challenge that you have for the next 20 minutes. I'll walk around if you need help.